Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Hey, so like a lot of you know, I used to be a degenerate flying cav player, but this season I switched from the Spring Wardens to the League of Order. And the reason I switched is, frankly, the Spring Wardens have fallen just too far behind, right? Now, I'm working on a video on how to fix the Spring Wardens, but for today, I thought we'd talk about a highly requested topic, and that's my cav pairings, right? Ground cav. What are the pairings I use? What are their talent builds, artifacts, etc.? And so that's what we'll be talking about today, right? Before we do that, I thought we'd just do a quick check-in on the KvK, 7017, obviously. It's been a really fun season. Dragon Zone opened, I think, like 5 days ago. And look, obviously it's going pretty well here. Now, we haven't hit season summer yet, so nothing's officially over, but we currently hold the dragon. To the south there, Kin and IA, those are our allies. And if we look on the eastern front here, where we have FG and KOD, they're still in the zone here, but kind of locked behind the choke. And on the western front, BB and POTC, they're completely out of the Dragon Zone at this point. Now, like I said, this has been a great season. In fact, we're still fighting. The main front, at least for us right now, is on this plateau right here. We're trying to capture that second rock. We have one already. We're trying to get the second one here to get better end of season rewards. And obviously, FA is resisting us. So that's where the main front is for us right now. Okay, so having said that, let's go over my cav marches. Now, I have two builds. I have a 1 infantry, 4 cav march build, and this is it right here. Right now, Skullgirl's got the traditional race car build. Honestly, I did not find this very strong this season. I love this in previous seasons, but this season with the additional, cav, additional heroes, I found that 1 infantry, 4 cav was suboptimal for me. The main build I use is this build right here. And this is what we'll be talking about in this video, right? So these are my 5 pairings, and we'll go over each of them individually. Obviously, some of these are pretty common, but I got some interesting twists on here, and I want to talk through them, okay? So we'll start with Emmeris, and I have Emmeris paired with Boxy, which is a very traditional pairing here. Nothing particularly interesting there. And then I have a pretty good Golden Rock with them. Decent. I'd like to work on it some more, but honestly, I just don't know if I'll have the time. There's some other higher priority pets that I got to work on first here, okay? Now, the one kind of interesting thing is I have the Greymar's Warhammer with Emmeris. And obviously, Greymar's Warhammer is a infantry artifact. And you can see I only have it level 1 here. But even with those two things here, I think this is super strong. And I recommend it for, 5 cav degenerates. Now, why do I recommend this? Well, what does Greymar's Warhammer do? When you activate it, it stuns enemies, up to 4 of them, basically in a pretty decent sized circle around you. It stuns them for 4 seconds, but if you have the Exemplar, that increases to 6 seconds. I find this extremely powerful for using with my cav ball. Why? A few reasons. First, it's a great offensive weapon, particularly against a retreating enemy, all right? If the enemy is trying to run away, you slam this down and you get 6 more seconds of DPS on them. That's usually enough to ghost face them. Second, it's really good when you want to retreat, right? Let's say you're in a bad situation, you slam this down, 4 of your enemies basically stop fighting you for a full 6 seconds, and then you can get away. And then third, right, like it's a great just opening move against an enemy cav ball, right? I rush my 5 cav in against an enemy 5 cav, and then I hit this pretty early on, and I get 6 seconds to try and gain the upper hand. Now let's take a look at his talents. And the main thing when I go through these talent builds is to understand that I really strongly value movement speed in all my cav marches. All my cav marches are set somewhere in the 60s in terms of their movement speed. Emmeris is no exception here. Now, on all these cav marches, most of them get the cav tree, obviously. And I love the first half of this cav tree, particularly the perfect ferocity talent, right? So what this does, it gives you additional 15% skill damage for the first 10 seconds of battle. That is 100% on plan, right? I don't want to get into sustained long fights with my cav. I want to rush in, hit your archers, hit your mages, and kill them very quickly with my skill damage, and then get out and find another fight. The rest of this, I go up the PvP tree here, which is actually pretty good. A couple things I'll point out here. This talent, Fury Flame, it gives you 5% more skill damage in the field. Okay, so like Rally Garrison isn't great, but I'm never using Emmeris in a Rally Garrison anyway. And the important thing to note here is if you go to sort of the corresponding talent here, this is only 4%, whereas the PvP tree gives you an additional percentage, so that's great. This is my build for Emmeris. Okay, so the second pairing we'll talk about is another fairly traditional pairing. That's Forondil Theo. Now I have the Oath of Stormpeak on here. I think it's a good artifact, although I do think that depending on your circumstances, there might be a better choice for you. The reason I keep Oath of Stormpeak in my lineup, first of all, is I have it exemplard, so it just has better effects. The other thing is the Oath of the Stormpeak gives you a clone of your full legion to include your pet, and I have a very strong Berserk Phaedrake that I use with Forondil, and so the fact that I get the clone of this Berserk Phaedrake is also very strong for me, and that's why I keep the artifact. Much like Emmeris, I have Forondil built out for movement speed. So the first thing I do is go down the cav tree, get the movement speed here, get perfect ferocity, love it. And then I go mostly the control tree. Couple reasons I go in the control tree. First of all, it empowers the Berserk Phaedrake, so obviously that's very good. The other thing is I find one march running the control tree in my 5 cav ball is just very strong for me. You know, it gives all these debuffs that all the other marches take advantage of. So that's why I love this build for Forondil. Okay, so the third build we'll talk about is Urag. Urag is arguably the strongest cav hero, but he's got two little weaknesses. The first weakness is he doesn't really have a great pet synergy that he has, and we'll talk about his pet that I use for him in a minute. The second weakness Urag has is that he's a bit of a slow boy, okay? Now, when you talk about that movement speed, there's a lot of trade-offs that you kind of have to weigh here. So let's first take a look at his artifact. I have the Wolfhowl Horn, I have the Exemplar version, I have it maxed out. And honestly, this is probably, as a cav artifact, this is probably the strongest straight cav artifact in the game right now, right? So it does a lot of damage. It also inflicts basically a tremble for 3 seconds, which the enemy can't do anything, although they can still counterattack. Okay, so and then additionally you get a bleed debuff. Basically once every minute and a half, whenever you hit someone with skill damage, they get a 600 bleed debuff for 3 seconds. Actually, it's pretty good. The really good thing about Urag is because Urag hits multiple targets, if he's the one triggering this bleed debuff, he can put it on 3 enemy legions, right? That's really strong, and that really encourages you to make Urag the primary in whatever pairing you have him in. Okay, so what are the trade-offs? Well, let's talk about Urag's talents. Urag has the skill tree available to him. The skill tree is extremely strong for what he was trying to do. The problem with the skill tree is there's literally no movement speed anywhere in the skill tree. So if you go to the end of this, you're kind of crippling his movement speed. So I mostly avoid the skill tree other than some leftover points here. I go down the cav tree, obviously, get that 15% movement speed there, and then obviously get perfect ferocity. And then I go up the PvP tree to get the movement speed there. Okay, here's the problem. Even after you add these all together, we get 10% here, 20%, 35%, 41%. Now Urag's got a skill which gives him another 10%, so now we're at 51%. That's decent, but for me that's still too slow, so I have to give him a deputy that gives him some movement speed. His natural deputy, Tobin, gives no movement speed, so that's why I have him with Falgrim to get that additional 10% movement speed. And we'll talk over Falgrim's toolkit here in just a minute. The other thing I'll mention is the pet I use with Urag. I'm using an Auric Warhound, which might not make sense until you realize it's basically just a hero enhancement build. I'm still working on this guy. It's kind of a side project I work on every week. I'm still building it out. The results have been fine. Urag's still doing very well, although I don't think really the pet is a major contributing factor to that. And frankly, I need more data. I need to build this out a little bit farther to get a good idea of how it's working. Now, like I said, I have him paired with Falgrim. Let's go over Falgrim's skill set to see how it pairs with a cav march, right? So we look at its rage skill. It does a pretty decent damage factor, and then it also either hits another target near whatever you're hitting, so AoE, that's great. Or if you can't hit another target, you do a little bit additional damage to your first target, right? You rather hit multiple targets, and most of the time I do, but at least I get a little bit of bonus on the initial target if I can't hit multiple targets, so this is pretty good. What about his second skill? All right, some defense, whatever, but 10% march speed, that's key. I need a march speed deputy, and Falgrim provides that. He also inflicts a little bit of a slow debuff. Whatever, that's fine. I get that from other places in my cav ball, so I don't really care that much about that. But the march speed, this is the main reason I like Falgrim here. His third skill, it only applies to marksman, so that's no help here. His fourth skill's okay, and then kind of the same thing with his awakened skill. So all this works pretty well. I had Falgrim awakened. It gives him his movement speed. That's why I have him paired with Urag. Okay, so the fourth pairing I have here is Li Shan paired with Nia. Li Shan kind of got a similar situation going on with Urag, as he's got the skills tree, but I want him to move very quickly, so how do I do that? Well, here's the real benefit here to the new artifact, the Lunaris. Lunaris gives you a buff whenever you gain camouflage, which only Nia can provide, that you get 40% movement speed while you're camouflaged. And so basically, because I have him paired with Nia and I have him with the Moon Spear, I can afford to go down some of these other trees and still have him move very quickly. And I have Li Shan with a very strong auric that I'm still working on. This is one of my better pets right now. So let's take a look at this talent tree. And remember, because he's got that 40% movement speed, I can go all the way down the skill tree, get all the skill talents here, which are awesome. I'm still going down the Cav tree to get that 15% movement speed as well as the Perfect Frosty. And so Li Shan, Nia, this is my strongest performing March, slightly beating out the Urag March. My final pairing is Marduk Tobin. And why do I use Marduk? Basically because Marduk has really good movement speed. And so he is the best way I can get a fifth march in there that can keep up with my other four marches. In fact, Marduk is actually slightly faster than all my other marches, and there's an important reason for that, right? I use the storm arrows with Marduk, and I really appreciate this a ton more than I used to, right? So what are the storm arrows for? They're basically for chasing down a retreating foe. So like I said, Marduk is the fastest of all my marches. He is usually faster than anything I'm hunting. So he'll get, I'll get close, he'll get his charge off, and then I will blink in front of the enemy with the storm arrows, kind of interrupting their retreat, if you will. Now they can, Marduk obstructs them, but he doesn't slow them down or anything. But usually my other marches have caught up by that point. They're charging, I get, for example, Greymar's Warhammer down, and I can usually kill whatever I'm hunting, thanks to Marduk's disruption efforts. Now why do I pair him with Tobin? Basically Tobin's the best hero I got left. Marduk blinking forward, this is usually my most vulnerable march, so the fact that Tobin has some defensive tools in his kit is nice. But otherwise, these guys are together just because that's what I have. I don't think Marduk is amazing. I love his movement speed, but one day they'll probably release a new Cav hero that can also move quick. And Marduk is frankly the first hero I have that would be benched. Now, as we go over Marduk's talent tree, it should be pretty obvious here that I'm maximizing movement speed as much as possible, right? I go up the PvP tree to get that 20% there. I go into mobility to get this 20% as well as this 2% here. And then the Cav tree, I'm only getting the 15% here. I am not getting Perfect Frosty with Marduk because, one, I need movement speed more than I need skill damage with him. He's my disruption hero. He is a support march, if you will. His job is not to do damage. And second, he doesn't really do that much damage anyway. Marduk's a casino hero. You can't guarantee that he's going to do skill damage with his rage skill. And even when he does skill damage, it's really not that much. Now, I got him paired with Tobin. Tobin does do good skill damage, but I just can't afford to go this. I need the movement speed more with this march. Okay, so those are my pairings. A couple other heroes I want to talk through and why I don't use them. First of all, we have one more Cav hero, that's Alistar. Why don't I use Alistar? He's benched at this point. Alistar gives me no movement speed bonus. His talent trees don't have good movement speed in them, and none of his skills do. He's just not super useful for me, either as a primary or as a deputy. So he's on the bench. So I see a lot of people using Magro with Forondil. I actually think that's a really good combination. Why don't I use Magro? You can see right here, I don't have him developed. Maybe I will develop him at some point, but right now he's kind of low priority for me, and so that's why I don't have him in the March. The final hero that I see being used pretty often is Moo. I actually think Moo is an excellent choice. She's got a lot of really good synergies, particularly with Forondil. But the reason I don't use Moo is I also use her as a mage commander. In fact, she's my best performing mage commander right now. And so for stamina reasons, I don't want to put her in both the Cav and mage lineup, because then at some point I'm not going to be able to use her for either. But if you don't use her like that, I think she's a very good choice. Alright, and that's my Cav lineup. Like I said, it's been performing extremely well for me this season. I'm probably going to keep running this or some slight variation of this next season. As far as Flying Cav go, I don't really expect to be going back to Flying Cav anytime soon. I think the entire Spring Warden faction needs a major buff. The reason I go with League of Order instead of Wilderberg is that I also play a lot of mages, and League of Order is clearly vastly superior for mage players. For straight Cav players, I think Wilderberg is slightly better. All right, and that's all I got for you today. And until next time, you stay classy, Bellara.